Hello, welcome to the Yarn and Yarns YouTube channel. My name is Angela and all the places you can find me should be linked in the description box below this video. Welcome back to the channel. You're most welcome here. I'm going to be chatting about books today, so if you're not interested in bookish topics, I completely understand. I'll be back soon with some more making content, so I hope you will join me for those videos instead. But if you are interested in my bookish waffle, then please do stick around, grab yourself a cuppa, maybe your latest project to work on while I chat about books. I'm going to be chatting about the books that I read in January and some of the things that I'm looking forward to reading in February. Before we get stuck in, just as a quick for your information, you'll notice as we go on in the video the angle changes slightly. I'm sitting just more that way on the sofa, and that's because I went to edit this video and then I realised I'd accidentally deleted the introduction section. How did I do that? I have no idea. So yeah, I'm recording the intro a little bit later, and the sun's moved around. So if I sit there, the sun is blaring right in my face. You don't really need to know all of that waffle, but I thought it might be a bit jarring as we switch in a minute to the other angle. So there's the explanation. If you've been here for a while, you know what happens around here. Things never go smoothly. Production quality here is far from professional. I just sit down, put the camera on and start talking. So yeah, if you're on board with that and you're on board with some bookish talk, let's get settled in and I'll tell you about the things that I've been reading. If you've been here for any of my bookish videos before, you know that I will read most genres. I do of course have favourites, but I will pretty much give anything and everything a try. Throughout January I managed to finish 7 books, one of which I started in December, and then I started and finished 6 other books, which was quite a good reading month for me, especially considering one of the books was a chunker. It was a 32-hour long audiobook. Most often I consume books via audiobook. I do sometimes read along with physical books as well, but I love the flexibility of audiobooks. It means that I can maybe pursue some of my other hobbies at the same time as reading. So I'll often listen to books while I'm knitting or spinning, or if I'm out for a walk, I'll sometimes have my audiobook on too. I'm loving how much more reading I'm getting done now that I've tuned into the possibility of audiobooks. I do have some reading goals for myself this year. I may have touched briefly on those in my 2020 sort of reading wrap up, and I'll put a link to that video up here if you haven't watched it. But I am hoping to read about 50 books this year, which I think, given the rates that I read last year, is definitely achievable. I'm also hoping to read some more classics this year, and I wanted to try and tackle some of the books that I already have on my shelf. Last year when I started rereading it again sort of in earnest, I'd kind of fell out of the reading habit for a good couple of years, but I'm definitely come back to it with a vengeance now, and I sort of accumulated quite a lot of books via local sort of second-hand shops, charity shops, and also I treated myself to some new books. But of course, as with a lot of other things, sometimes it's easier to accumulate these things faster than you consume them. So yeah, my goal this year is to try and work through my bookshelf. I didn't do a great job with that in January. In fact, I only read 1 book from my bookshelf in January. That was because my reading list got a bit hijacked. I often borrow audiobooks via the library. I use the Borrow Box app here in the UK, and at the end of last year I started a series of books and put reserves on the other 3 books in that series, and they all came through at once. Try and do better with my reading goals in terms of reading stuff off my shelf for this month. In January, I read 2 fantasy books, 1 science fiction book, 1 non-fiction, 2 historical fictions, and a sort of dystopian, I guess you would call it. I think the first book I finished is probably classified as dystopian. So yeah, let's chat about that one. It was The Blue Ticket by Sophie Mackintosh, and I'll pop a picture of the book cover up on the screen. And this is probably my least favourite read of January. I considered not finishing it at certain points, but I was kind of interested enough in the journey of the main character to continue it through, but in the end it just really wasn't a book for me. So it's kind of set in a world where women's futures are determined for them. When you reach maturity, you get taken to like a government sanctioned centre and get given a blue ticket or a white ticket, which will determine whether you will get married and have children, or whether you will live a life child-free and you'll be concentrating on your career. And our main character, Calla, gets given a blue ticket, which means she's destined to be childless. However, she reaches a point in her life where she is questioning the choice that society has made for her. She becomes pregnant, and basically that means she is now a fugitive in her society because she has broken these societal rules. So I guess it's a sort of exploration of what might happen if choices were taken away from us. I liked the sort of idea behind this book and thought it might be quite an interesting sort of exploration, and I think the book was really well written. It just wasn't one for me. I was interested enough in Calla to want to find out how her story played out, but she wasn't really a character that I liked. I didn't really care about her too much, and yeah, the book just wasn't for me. I don't think I really, maybe it just went over my head a little bit and I couldn't quite tune in to the messages that the author was trying to convey. And I guess it's the same with many things in life. There'll be books out there that you do relate to and books that you don't, and Blue Ticket was just one that wasn't for me. The next book on my January list is a continuation of a series that James and I have been listening to together on Audible, and it's the Terry Pratchett series, the Tiffany Aching series, which is set within Terry Pratchett's larger Discworld. And this is the fourth book in the Tiffany Aching series, I Shall Wear Midnight, and we listened to this one together in January. I'm really enjoying listening to those books with James. He's been on at me for ages to listen to that series of books, and I'm thoroughly enjoying them. The We Free Men, the first instalment in this series, made it to my favourite books of 2020 list. This one did not disappoint. It was another brilliant instalment in the Tiffany Aching series, although I will say, if you are reading this series and you haven't got to this book yet, the beginning of this book is very dark. There's a very traumatic thing that happens at the start of this book. James had already warned me, but it was still quite difficult to listen to or to read about. So yeah, the book does get brighter and is written with Terry Pratchett's signature humour and wit and amazing insight into sort of human characters and characteristics and societal problems and issues. But yeah, just be warned if you are reading this series that the beginning of this one is quite rough. This one is definitely one of the top books that I read in January. Sometimes I find it really hard to pick a book of the month. I thought for purposes of like keeping my book journal, I thought I'd try and have a book of the month, but I think because I read across so many genres and some of them are sort of wildly different, it can be really hard to pick an absolute favourite. This month I've got 3 books that I really enjoyed that sort of stood out above the others. And I Shall Wear Midnight is one of those. My next book is also one of those, and it is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini, and I'll pop a picture of that one up on the screen. This was a big chunk of a book. It was a 32-hour long audiobook. And Christopher Paolini is most well known for the Eragon series, which is a young adult fantasy series, I think. I started that last year. I borrowed the first book from my library, but I'm happy to wait until I've got some more Audible credits to continue with the series because my library doesn't have the rest of the series on Audible. So yeah, I was interested to see how this author would tackle science fiction, and I love this book. Again, a favourite for January. There were parts of it, not quite a 5-star for me, because there were parts of it that did feel like they were dragging on a little bit. The reason this book has made it into my kind of favourites for January is it's really reignited my interest in reading more science fiction, set against a backdrop where humans have started to explore and colonise space, and it follows our main character Kira, who is out on a mission to explore this world that we are thinking about colonising, and she comes across an alien relic which completely changes her future and the future of civilization. If you're a science fiction fan and you like first contact stories, you like a bit of an epic space battle, this one will definitely be for you. I really enjoyed it, and for the fact that it was such a long book, there were only a couple of parts that sort of dragged on a little bit for me. For the most part, it was a sort of fast-paced and interesting story with enough going on to keep you engaged throughout the length of the book. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one. So if you're into sci-fi, give it a go. And then my next read was The Living Mountain by Nan Shepherd, and I'll pop a picture of that up on the screen as well. This was the third of my favourite books for January. This was a non-fiction book, quite a short book, concentrating on the Cairngorm mountain range up in Scotland. And it was written, I believe, in the 1940s, 1950s, and it's basically just a really gentle book exploring these mountains and Nan Shepherd's love for this landscape. A really lovely, calming listen, and lots of lovely sort of poetical descriptions of the landscape, the weather, intertwined with the stories of some of the people that live sort of near and around the mountain, with a few sort of little vignettes of some of the people that Nan meets as she is walking and exploring the Cairngorms herself. And yeah, I just really loved the book. And there was one quote in the book that's really stuck with me, and I believe, if I remember the context, it's not the context so much as the words themselves that have stuck with me, but I think Nan was walking and some clouds had come down and then they were starting to disperse, and it's kind of about the landscape that kind of reveals itself. Although I could be mistaken on the context, but she says, I knew when I'd looked for a long time that I'd hardly begun to see. And that really resonated with me as someone who spends a lot of time at my local natural hangout, which is the beach here in Penarth. Every time I go there, there's something different to see. The landscape itself is constantly shifting. We have a sort of pebbly beach and a high tidal range, so the tides are constantly sort of shifting the way that the beach looks. Different weathers, different light conditions all change how that landscape looks to me. So that really resonated with me, and I think that thought can also be applied to many other areas in life. As you start looking at things in depth, you realise there's more and more to learn, more and more to see. So yeah, I really loved that quote from the book. The fifth book that I finished in January was Aurora Rising, and again I'll pop a picture up on the screen, by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I was obviously in the mood for a bit more science fiction. This was a young adult science fiction, and probably won't make it to my favourite series of all time, but I definitely enjoyed it. It's set again in a world where humans are able to travel through space, and they travel by a technology that they call the fold, I think, if I'm remembering that right. But over time they've discovered that the older you are, the bigger the effects that this space sort of travel system has on you. So hence a lot of the space travellers are young adults. Yeah, quite an enjoyable read. I'm looking forward to the next instalment. It's kind of a found family kind of story. There's a crew of recent academy graduates who get put together. They're kind of like the misfits. There's one kind of star pupil who gets assigned a bunch of misfits because at the time he was meant to be picking his crew, he's actually rescuing Aurora, who has been sort of stranded in this interdimensional time travel fold thing. I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it. But yeah, it's quite a fun adventure. It does have some of those young adult tropes that I'm not a massive fan of, but a really enjoyable listen nonetheless. I'm looking forward to getting the second instalment of that series through from the library soon. The final two books that I listened to were part of the same series, and this was the series that kind of hijacked my reading list for January. And I've been reading the Boudica series by Amanda Scott. I think it's quite an old series now. There are 4 books in total, and I have now read the first 3. In January, I finished the second book, which is Dreaming the Bull, and the third book, which is Dreaming the Hound. And I think anyone from the UK will know the story of Boudica. It's well taught. I think I learnt about it back in primary school. Boudica is a well-known female figure from our ancient history who led a rebellion against the invaders of Rome in around about AD 60. There's not much known about her. I think there's a few paragraphs of text written by the Roman conquerors that mention her, but Amanda Scott has built this whole book series around the story of Boudica and her extended family and tribes and the society of that time. So she's put a lot of effort and thought into building this world. And yeah, I've just been really enjoying the books. Again, I don't think they'll be a favourite series of all time, but I've enjoyed them enough to devour them one after the other. I read the first one back in December. As soon as I finished the second one, I was eager to go on to the third. So yeah, definitely a fun listen if you like sort of historical fiction. My favourite parts of that are actually not the story of the Boudica herself. If you know Boudica's story, then you know the over sort of arching path that the story will take. So to me, she's one of the sort of lesser interesting characters, although she's the main character. There's one character in particular who's known by several names throughout the book, who is her brother, and I love following his story. The thing I love about the books is just the sort of detail about everyday life. Obviously, again, this is largely an imagining of the author. There are some archaeological records, but it's going to be really hard to know what the day-to-day life of someone living right back in AD 60 would actually be like. But yeah, I'm really enjoying Amanda Scott's kind of vision of what that would be like. If you're interested in historical fiction, then I think you would probably enjoy this one. It's because there are 4 books, it follows family over multiple years, multiple generations. So yeah, if you like those sorts of multi-generational family stories too, then you might enjoy this series. That's everything that I read in January. Quite a lot, but 5 to 8 books a month was kind of what I was averaging last year, so that seems to be carrying through to this year too. As for reads in February, as I mentioned before, I'm going to try and get a little bit better about reading some things from my shelf and not letting my library reservations dictate my reading too much. Famous last words. In February, I'm going to be looking forward to finishing the Boudica series. I've got the final book, which is Dreaming the Serpent Spear, to read. We're also going to be finishing up the Tiffany Aching series. We've actually started this book. I'm recording this several days into February, The Shepherd's Crown, and the beginning of this book already has me devastated. I'm not going to say any more. I will try and keep things as spoiler-free as possible on my book reviews, but yes, I'm not happy. And then I have already picked a book off my shelf. Obviously, The Shepherd's Crown is off my shelf, but I've picked another book off my shelf that I really want to get stuck into this month, and this is the book. It is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. So I am looking forward to getting stuck into this one as well. So just as a synopsis for this one, on the back it says, "This is Britain as you've never read it. This is Britain as it's never been told. From the top of the country to the bottom, across more than a century of change and growth and struggle and life, Girl, Woman, Other follows 12 very different characters on an intertwined journey of discovery. It is future, it is past, it is fiction, it is history, it is a novel about who we are now." And from what I've read about this book, I think it mainly follows British black women. So I've heard mixed things about this book, on the whole good, but I have seen a few negative reviews as well. I guess that's to be expected for pretty much every book out there ever. but I'm looking forward to getting stuck in to see what I think about this one. So thank you so much for joining me for my bookish chat. I still feel a little bit awkward talking about books, and I've kind of struggled through this video a little bit, but hopefully the more I do it, the easier it will become. In the comments below, let me know if you had any standout reads in January, or let me know if there's anything you are looking forward to reading in February. I shall be back again soon with more making content, bookish content, journaling content, all of the things. You know me, that I won't stay away for too long. I hope you will join me for the next video, but until we get to spend time together again, I hope you get to do some of the things that you enjoy. Great big woolly and papery hugs to you all. Bye for now.